Hey everyone, wanted to cover a deck that I'm personally super excited about. It's a deck that I think I'm going to be running at my locals and hopefully more competitively in OP05, but it is the Red Purple Kid from Starter Deck 10. This is a leader that is widely considered to be the worst leader of the three from the Starter Deck 10 package. However, I think at OP05 he gets some really nice tools and could be kind of like a sleeper hit if played the right way and built the right way. So, a big reason this leader is kind of overlooked is despite being a 5 life multicolor leader, which is great, he has this kind of top line effect where if he's at 4 or more life, you are 4,000 power on your turn only. So it makes it kind of hard to swing with your leader until you're at 3 life, which is limiting. But the leader can still attack, which is great. What makes him really really shine is this Don -1 effect when attacking. The leader gains 2,000 power for this turn. So when you are back at that 5 life threshold for essentially free, Dawn -1, because so you can use the rest of Dawn, you are a 7k leader on offense. So in some ways, even better than Katakuri's ability, because you don't actually need to put a Dawn under your leader to get to that 7k threshold. Uh, so there's kind of like a lot of untapped potential in this leader. He can be very, very aggressive. I think there's a couple different ways to build him, and so the list I'm going to show you guys today may not be the list that I ultimately run, but it's one that's been working really well for me and one that I'm super excited about. And I think like a really good package for him that benefits a lot from the red restrictions being lifted in OP05. So to kick it off, we are running the Straw Hat package. So we got 4 of the Nami Searcher, and then we have Sanji. This is a deck that wants to go second because if you go second and you play Sanji on curve, you're going to have a really great second turn. You will likely take a hit from your opponent on their 3 Dawn turn. Then at 4 Dawn, you can play something like a Zoro, like a Frankie, and then you can use Sanji's ability to get yourself to 3 life, swing for 7k, and then because you're at 3 life, Kid is now a 5k leader, and then you can use his ability to swing for 7k again. So for that turn, you got 2 7k swings in, and you get to develop your board as well. It's a pretty solid turn. Maybe you played Wire, maybe you played Heat, and so that kind of gives you some Dawn -1 effects as well. So that's kind of the opening hand that's ideal for this leader. But what you're really building towards is getting to Captain Kid. So this is a blocker that was added in OP05, and it is a phenomenal, phenomenal card. Probably going to be a staple for a lot of purple decks, but amazing in this deck specifically because what he does is when you use a Dawn minus effect on your turn, you can add 1 Dawn back from your deck as active. So essentially, it makes the leader's ability free in that sense, and it stacks. So if you have 2 of these out or 3 of these out, you can actually use this card to ramp, which is pretty insane. And then this pairs really well with things like Radical Beam. So if you imagine you have 5 Dawn, you can play the Captain Kid character, and then you can swing for 7k with your leader ability, get 1 Dawn active, and now you're sitting with a 6k blocker. You swung for 7k, and you have 1 Dawn up for Radical Beam. So that's like a really nice combo you can do with him. Additionally, you have some other OP05 cards. Usohachi is just a 2k counter, but that effect is really nice if you're playing against a blocker heavy leader. If you're worried about Sakazuki just kind of like stacking Borsalinos and Rebecca, things like that, you can put this out early, try to keep it alive, and then use that effect. Not ideal, but it helps. Zoro Juro is actually a really great card to play if you don't have like a Frankie or something like that on that second turn. So you play him, and when you're at 3 or less life, you can use this card to ramp. So if they don't have on play removal, it's a really, really good way to get your Dawn back after using leader ability. It lets you kind of be a lot more aggressive early game. You have 2 of the Rush Zoro just to kind of catch people off guard, capitalize off early blocks, things like that. 4 of the 6k Frankie Vanilla. This is, I think card that is flexible. I don't know if this is the right choice, but it kind of gives you some. It's like a nice card to have if you're trying to be an aggressive deck, which this deck is. You run 4 of the 6-drop King from starter deck 4. A lot of people playing 4 drops, I've noticed in OP05, so just having some on-play removal that also allows you to develop a strong body is really powerful. Similarly, Queen is just a really great purple staple. And then you have more of the Kid Pirates package. So Heat works really well because when you Dawn -1, he gains 2,000 power for your turn and your opponent's turn. So if you're a leader that has Dawn -1 built into your leader ability, like Kid is, you can pretty much always keep this at a 6k. So it works really, really well. And same for Wire, who's a blocker that if you Dawn -1, he can cycle a card. So there's a lot of really great synergy in this deck. You get a lot of hits off Nami with all the Straw Hat package because these 2 cards are also Straw Hats. And then your top end is your 7-drop Kids, which make you a 6k leader on offense and defense. And then if you have a 5-drop blocker out when you play them, you're kind of getting that ability for free. So this is pretty much the deck. Let's jump into some matches, see how we do. I think it's a really, really strong list and one that is very close to kind of where I would want it to be as a final package. All right, let's dive in and see who we play against. So here we're looking at a match with the green purple Doflamingo. Maybe not the most meta relevant match in OP05, but I think an interesting matchup that you're not going to see a lot. So wanted to showcase how this might work against a deck that's considered very control heavy with like a lot of blockers, a lot of counters. I think it's a matchup that should be favored towards green purple Dofi if you're playing this as an aggro deck, which I am. So interesting to kind of see like how I play through this and what the lines of play are actually like. So first thing I do is swing 5k, try to put some pressure on this Doflamingo, and then I play the Sorojuro, which will give me ramp if I'm at 3 life or less, which if he plans to attack, I should be. And then this following turn, I'm actually super excited about. I think this is just like a perfect example of like the really cool combo plays that this deck is capable of. So first thing I do, I swing 5k with Zoro, and that gives me an active Dawn, which is an amazing ability, and which puts me back at 6 active Dawn, 7 Dawn total, which you can kind of see what's happening here. Because I'm back at 6 Dawn, I can now use that to play King, kill the Nami, and then I swing 5k at the Doflamingo. I was fine swinging 5k here because he had already used a 2k to counter out earlier, so I felt like swinging 7k and going down an extra Dawn wasn't really worth it. But overall, like really, really happy with that play. I think that's just kind of a prime example of why I love this deck so much and why I think it has some really strong potential. I think the list I have currently and that I kind of showed you right now is really, really tight. But I've been doing a lot of practice matches and it still struggles at times. And so I feel like there's probably a variation that maybe unlocks more of the potential of this deck. So I'm going to keep experimenting with it. So if you think from that very early clip this is an interesting deck and you want to see more, watch the rest of the video, and then look out for the future ones. I'll let you guys know when there are variations to this list. So he plays the Luffy and the Usopp, and now I am thinking through what my options are. First thing I do is I just swing 7k with the king, just kind of a free poke, see what he does if he uses a counter, and he does. He's a spider swap, which is actually really good to get that out of his hand. I put myself to 6k, but add another Dawn to put myself to 7k and swing one more time. Really just planning to develop a wide and tall board, and then just kind of put a little bit of pressure on every single turn. I see that he has a lot of cards in hand. He activates the Thunder Bogwa to get himself to 10 Dawn. I'm like worried now that I am going to set myself up for a 10 drop Doflamingo. So that's really unfortunate. I'm like thinking through, can I count what I can do next turn without being able to swing with most things, and then he decides not to play it, or maybe doesn't have it, and is instead going to swing 9k with his Usopp, and then after that swing 7k and plays an Uta, leaving or getting 2 Dawn Bannock from his leader ability. So this lets me play another 7-drop Kid if I want to, but first I swing with the King once more, just to see if he lets this go, if he blocks. Hoping maybe he'll block with the Luffy, and then I could just put a lot of pressure into it. He decides to spiderweb here, which I was surprised by. I feel like that card is really, really good with blockers, and so using it once for nothing and once for Usopp felt kind of not worth it to me. But happy it's gone, and he's only down to 4 cards in hand at this point after countering out with that 2-drop. And then I use leader ability to go to 9k into this Luffy, and he blocks with the Uta. I left 2 Dawn up for Radical Beam. I could have, used that 2 Dawn and then not -1 on myself with leader ability, which would have put me at 9 Dawn next turn instead of 8. But I felt like the Radical Beam would be helpful here. And then, ended up playing red into a 10 drop. So completely unnecessary. Could have had an extra Dawn on this turn. So like I said earlier, still learning this deck, still figuring out like what the optimal lines of play are. But, even with my obvious misplays and some, less than optimal decision making, I'm still able to kind of do pretty well with it, which gives me hope. So he blocks, counters out with the 2k. I'm thinking through of what to do. Like, do I play a wire? I decide to play the Nami and continue to leave 2 up for Radical Beam. I think my goal is just get past this, and hopefully I can get him on crackback. He attacks with 10k with the Doflamingo, so now I'm worried that there's a second one, and I was right. He plays a second one. So back-to-back Doflamingos, this is kind of like the worst case scenario. If I'm able to play through this, I think it just kind of shows that the deck has a lot of potential, which is kind of my thought process going to this. I decide to play the blocker because it lets me get free value out of my ability, and it's a blocker, which is obviously very, very good. And so I swing 7K into his leader. He's at 3 cards, right? So and only one blocker right now. So if I can just survive the 10 drop kids, I have a really, really good shot of winning on the next turn. So I decide to play Wire here, getting rid of the king. Um, just one more blocker. I think it was more valuable than having an extra radical beam. So he has 5 attacks. I'm thinking about sugar. I'm thinking about um, really, I guess, really just sugar, just resting that wire. But despite that, I decide to counter out of the first one, knowing that I can counter out of it. And then he does 8K. So I'm looking at what he has and how many attacks he has left and how much counter I have in hand, which is a lot. And I decide to give him this attack because I wanted to avoid a situation where he left the Luffy up. And I figured, even if he plays Sugar, I have 2 blockers left. I should be fine. I was also thinking like if I could potentially save some of these blockers and attack with them next turn. So I'm trying to do that as well. And so I figure at this point I'm set. He can play Sugar if he wants to, but there's nothing he can really do to stop me. And then he just tries to clear my 8-drop kids, and the game is pretty much mine at this point. I mean, if some events can really mess me up, so trying to think through of like what the optimal math is. I do 7K first, and of course he has the third Spider's Web, which kind of as I was talking about earlier, is such a good card. So it was a bit surprising to me that he used it so early. And now we have a 9K swing with our 7-drop kid, which buffs my leader. He's thinking kind of through the lines of play here, but with 2 cards in hand, there's not really much he can do. So that's pretty much going to be the end of this match. We can see what he has in his last life. If he takes this and then his potentially has a Punk Gibson, it could save him, but I kind of have to take the risk anyways. Not much else I can do in this situation. He's thinking through what to do here. I guess debating whether to block or to take this one and then block on the next one. Ultimately, he blocks, lets that go, and then I'm just kind of safe to go in with the rest of my board. So on with the 7-drop kid. And then he takes this. Doesn't really matter what he has in his life at that point. There's no blocker triggers for green. And then I can just kind of safely go with the rest of my Dawn into his leader. All right, and that's the match. He has a couple of counters in there, but hopefully that was kind of a good example of what this deck can do. And let's move right into this match with our Sakazuki. So I'll kind of say like right off the bat that this match I think was not played optimally by myself or the Sakazuki. I think we both could have made better moves. So I don't know if it's like the best example of what Kid can do in OP05 against meta leaders, but I hope it just kind of gives you guys like a flavor of what I see where I see this kind of deck going in OP05 and why I am so excited about it. But right off the bat, I think this is again we're not in an optimal situation because Sakazuki got second from me, and going first against Sakazuki is just the absolute worst. If you play a 3 Dawn character, he can make it 2 Dawn with his ability and then use Hound Blaze to KO it while also buffing his brand new. So I'm kind of forced to just kind of to swing in and not really develop board at all because that's really all I'm able to do in this situation. So he plays the Porcelino, get a blocker out. I play my own blocker and then use leader ability, and I'm able to essentially use it for free because of Kid Blocker, which is great. And I'm kind of left with this with this hanging Dawn, which is why I'm such a big proponent of Radical Beam in this deck. There are a lot of situations when Kid Blocker is out, you're left with this one hanging Dawn that you can't really do anything with. And so having Radical Beam in the deck is like a really nice way to essentially make yourself into a bit of a weaker version of Green Purple Doffy, having that extra Dawn at the end of your turn to use for defensive counter. So that's one way to do it. I think the other option is just to kind of be a little smarter with how you attack. So you can see here, I don't think through my attacks effectively enough because I could have done a bit of a stronger attack with Kid Blocker's effect. So I played the Zoro. I'm going into the Porcelino because I think that in this matchup, being able to just kind of like get that one final swing in is really what makes or breaks the game. And so getting rid of that blocker when I have a chance is really important. And he can't be KO'd. So I have King in the deck, but he can't do anything about Porcelino. So I swing AK into the Porcelino. And then that's kind of where I messed up because realizing now that I still haven't used a Don minus effect. So I use it to go 7k into the Sakazuki. Don't want him to get out of it with one free card if I go into Porcelino. And now I'm kind of stuck with a hanging Don at 3 life. So Radical Beam isn't fully online. It won't be a 4k. Um, so kind of I did that a bit differently. I could have played the Zoro, but then swung 6k with Kid, used the ability to get to 8k, and then had the extra Don to swing AK with Zoro again into the Porcelino, which likely would have been a slightly better turn. But I think it not the end of the world to get Sakazuki down to 2 life. And got 2 bodies on board. It got a very wide hand. Feeling largely pretty good about where I am at this point in the game for now. So he does 7k with the Kuzan, -4 on my Kid Blocker. I kind of see where this might be going. I decided to use the Radical Beam off trigger just so he can't swing 5k for free. He would have to allocate Don, um, and which I think was a good move because he was trying to swing 5k there. And so he ends up going 7 anyways, leaving 4 Don up. So realize that Aluchi is inbound, and of course he plays it, and I lose 2 of my bodies there, which is unfortunate. But I have a lot of cards in hand, so I feel pretty good. I have a lot of defensive power in my hand. He's at 2 life as well. He's got only 4 cards. So overall, I'm feeling pretty confident about the match at this point. The one thing that I kind of wish I had was more top end cards. So my best card in my hand is Queen right now, which is not really what you want to see. But I'm able to get this nice combo off where I draw 2 um, and then play wire with and trash 2. So I end up trashing the counterless cards because I'm concerned about dying essentially. I figured the queen and the wire are also likely going to be removed. They're not super high cost. And so if they get removed before an attack happens, then I'm kind of susceptible to just a bum rush. But in hindsight, like I should have kept at least the king, just something to remove one of his bodies and develop a more sustainable presence on the board. He ends up playing this 10 drop Kaido, which I don't see a lot in Sakazuki. I've seen it in like top and queen lists. It's such a good card though. I mean, I can understand why you'd play it. He was at 2 cards. He played it. Now he's at 6, and he has a 12k body on board. So I can 100% understand why someone would play this. I just haven't seen it as much in this, but it at least gives me the comfort to know that he won't be able to remove those blockers this turn because he used up all his Dawn. And then he sings with his Kuzan, and then I give him a 1k. So at this point, I'm like a little more concerned. I don't really have an attacker on board. I go 7k with the queen. My logic being that blockers are going to be useless. They're going to get removed before they really have any value. They'll die right away. So might as well get some attacks in with them. And then I do 7k with lead and then use the ability. And so I get the king. So this is where I'm also like not really sure what my thought process was. I could have played the king here and killed a Kuzan or the Lucci or something like that. But I take an alternate route. The other thing that's kind of and trash it when he plays the Hellblaze. So potentially not the best route I could have taken at that turn. And now I kind of feel like I don't really have a lot of good options. Similarly, like I know that wire's a very easy removal target, so I just decide to swing 7k with it and decide that I will try and survive with my radical beams versus worrying too much about using a blocker. And then he ends up blocking with the Borsellino there for 7k swing when he just let an 9k through earlier. So, this is kind of what I mean. Like this match is not, I think, the example of optimal gameplay. What is a tier 0 starter deck 10 Kid look like versus a tier 0 Sakazuki. I think both players here are kind of just learning, but it's still very interesting to kind of see how these two decks interact with each other. He plays the Mihawk, removes my queen, and then he thinks through kind of the rest of his attacks. He kills the wire here, so that's able to get him, a clear board. And then he starts going face. I obviously have counter for 5k swings. It would be very surprising if I didn't. And I decide that I'm just going to take all this because if I can't get through this round anyways, I lose. And then I just go full 16k at lead. And it goes through. He has like no counter in hand. So pretty surprising outcome, but I think a good example of what the deck can do. Okay, Battle of the Starter Deck 10 leaders. Let's see how this goes. I'm very happy with my opening hand here. Sanji and Kid right in the opening hand is really, really good. So I think we're poised to do well here, poised to be super aggressive in the early game. And all right, perfect. Oh, and then Zoro. That's great. So I see the curve. It's going to be really, really nice here. He'll likely just swing 8k or 9k into leader. Oh, nope, 6k. There we go. What's he going to play? It's his own Zoro. Interesting. All right. Let's counter out of that. So I'm going to use Sanji's ability here. So first things first, let's do this. Puts me at 7. Let's go there. And then we can do 8k into that leader. Okay, pretty solid turn for us. And then next turn we can play our Captain Kid, which means we'll be able to attack and also get a Dawn back. My goal, I think, here is just protect Zoro. I'm guessing, will go into Zoro versus the Sanji, but you can never be too sure. Some people might just go for the Sanji because it's the easier removal. But with Zoro on the board and Captain Kid, I can basically play him, use leader ability, get a Dawn back, and then put that on Zoro for another swing. So it's a pretty nice little combination for me that keeps up, an aggressive pace into this leader. He's declaring attack. All right, he went for the Sanji, just to get the guaranteed clear. He left that up. All right, so I'm feeling pretty good. This is honestly just the ideal curve. This is really how this deck is meant to be played. And everything else that you kind of put into this is just to try to get you here. So if you get in the early game, it's amazing. Otherwise, you're really just trying to survive and put up pressure until you get some of these cards. All right, we got a guard point out. That's really good. And then we got a 1k out. All right. He's at 8 Dawn, which means he gets to use his ability to get to 9 Dawn, which means he could put a Kaido down here, which would kill the kid, which would be unfortunate. But I think we got some good value out of it already. Let's see if he runs Kaido or if he's playing it. All right, he started with his Rush Luffy. I could defend this, but I'll let it go. All right. All right, we're looking good. So let's just put some aggro on. I'll even use the ability here. Let's go 8k. Burn whatever cards he has in his hand. Okay, guard point out. All right, we're looking pretty good. He has 5 cards left. He can play, 10 drop Luffy, either the manga one or the Rush one. But he's only at 1 life. And so as long as I can survive these turns, I have a pretty clear line on a win here. Yeah, I think that may have just cemented his loss, if I'm being honest. And he should go into the blocker. Yep, okay. And that we left one up for Radical Beam, which is why Radical Beam is such a good card in this deck. With Kid on the board, you'll almost always have a Dawn up for it. So that's pretty much the end of the match. I know today's matches weren't always the most high-level competitive gameplay, but this is a deck I'm still learning, a deck I'm still fine-tuning, and one that I really hope to make competitive over time. So let me know what you guys think. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks again for watching. Really appreciate it.